Welcome to A Lot Going On with Raj Architecture. It's an unfortunate start because Vic, who is sat 1 meter from me right now, has just become overcome with the flu, and we've got a big meeting in 2 hours. So he's going to produce, and the person that was going to produce is now sat in Vic's seat, which Vic has warmed up for him. Is Adnan. You might have seen us on his podcast, Fail Forward, and he runs his own community here as well called the Arabian Running Collective.
That's correct.
And he's just joined CCA to work on the My Friends, Your Friends brand, which is our biggest brand, and we put it in the hands of a 28-year-old. So let's see how that works out. Adnan, welcome. Do you want to tell folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Firstly, thank you, Raj and Vic, for having me on. It's been a pleasure getting to know you guys and, getting to where we are today. So my name's Adnan, 28 years old, figuring out the world, but also excited for what we're going to achieve. Across the board, I run the Fail Forward podcast, as you mentioned. I also run a collective here, which is Arabian Run Collective. That's everything from small community activations to bring up the fitness community in Dubai, all the way to large-scale events and races as well. Mm-hmm. Do want to talk a little bit about my interests? Definitely very interested to see where AI is going. I also have a fascination for aerospace and space travel, so there's a potential we could get into that. And honestly, generally a pretty curious person. If you love spoons and you're going to talk about spoons, man, I'll be interested.
Okay, spooning. Spoons or spooning?
Spoons.
Let's get into a little bit of today then. So I also had a very interesting chat with this girl, Jess, and this is her product. It's called Teff. So she's in the business of using this grain, which is called Teff, to produce a super low glycemic index cookie, which is also like this cookie is healthier than eating a banana. Wow. So you're a big health guy. This is currently being used. They've just come out of NDA, but this is currently being used by football athletes and boxing athletes and stuff like that, because this has been approved by their coaches as something they can snack on, because their diets are $1 million diets, right? Because they got to make sure that these people win and whatnot. So I'm going to throw you one. Have a little piece of that. Me and Vic are going to share one. And they're pretty good cookies, man. And I just got a little bit of coffee left with me. Managed to get to raw coffee this week and get laced up with something there. So that's quite good. Have a little bite and tell me what you think.
Yeah.
All right.
There's also a lot to be spoken about this packaging, which is very simplistic, clean, and kind of has a little...
It's got a luxury vibe to it, yeah?
Yeah, it's got a luxury vibe to it, which honestly works with the community in Dubai and potentially all around the world too.
Yeah. So yeah, she's looking at expanding into Dubai. She's one of those people that's come here and fallen in love with the place, which I think is super interesting. So we see that a lot, especially with British expats coming over. Right. Who's going to take the first bite and start the review? Okay, you're going to have to keep talking if I'm biting then.
All right. So at the top, it actually doesn't look like a traditional cookie, right? It almost looks closer to a little bit of a circular protein bar, which I like, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's just purely from an association perspective, or actually it probably tastes like a protein bar. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, it does. I want to know what Vic's thoughts are. Vic says he likes it. Yeah. It's super healthy. Take. I had one yesterday. So, and Vic's going to bounce because he's got a phone call. That's so funny. All right, so thoughts, Adnan. What do you reckon to it?
It tastes great.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost got the consistency of something between a cookie and a brownie, which I do appreciate, right? Because a cookie has a dry flavor to it, or a dry consistency to it, but the brownie has that juiciness, and it's kind of right in the middle of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's lovely. I like this. I could eat them all day long. Mm-hmm. Problem is, even when I had them yesterday, I was wearing my light blue pants, which I'm wearing again today, and I have the same chocolate stains all over my groin, where it's a bit crumbly. But it's a delicious product. So thank you so much, Jess, for the samples. Me and the guys really like them. As far as stories this week are concerned, I think that was all my out and about this week. It wasn't out and about too much. Obviously, I'm just here for 2 weeks before I get to New York. So preparing for that. Set up some incredible meetings, which I'll be able to reveal. I think the best thing to do is to talk about these meetings once I get to New York.
Okay.
I'm meeting some amazing creative people once I get out there from as soon as I land. So really excited about that. If you're listening to the podcast and you want to connect me to anybody in New York, Toronto, and maybe even Los Angeles, then please do. We're really excited about getting out there and doing our thing this summer. Right, big topic of the week for me, AI. You said that one of your interest points in general terms has been AI. Mm-hmm. Why are you interested in AI? And then we'll go over some of the big stories from this week.
I mean, a lot of this stuff that I've been thinking about is generally associated with the concept of a singularity. And that's been in conversation for the last, 3, 5, potentially even 10 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Way
I think
before the GPT conversation.
way, way, way before it, right? And
Do you want to explain to people what singularity is?
it's essentially a point in time where computing intelligence essentially rivals and surpasses that of the combined human intelligence of the world, simply put. Over the past, let's say 10 years, this has been a very theoretical concept saying that it will happen, or here's a prediction of when it'll happen. But I feel that in the last 6 months, it's become very real in terms of us being able to see very tangible steps and apply a much more calculated prediction mechanism to when it's going to happen, because we are seeing steps that are bringing us close to that point.
Yeah.
And I guess the question that I actually was going to ask you a little earlier that I didn't get to do it is, we saw ChatGPT come out roughly around Jan and blow up in the mainstream. It seems fascinating that right after that happened, almost every other company in a similar space within search and technology released their own versions of a ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Were they all just hiding a technology that now they felt was safe to release? Or were they all kind of working on this at the same time and just hit that finish line at release at the same time? Like, talk to me about what suddenly sparked this massive exponential increase in release of these software and services.
So there's this concept of competition, right? What kind of lead is the first mover advantage going to get? So typically what happens is, if you look at someone like a Samsung and an Apple will allow Samsung to put very, very high quality lenses, very, very high quality hardware inside its technology, like Samsung phones. And then Apple will follow years later. And if you know anybody who owns an Android phone, they're always saying, oh, I just got this new Samsung and it can do X, Y, and Z, and Apple will be able to do it in 2 years. And they're not wrong. That's because Apple is comfortable with the kind of first mover advantage that Samsung will have with the technology and how it will develop the market. And Apple is comfortable and believes in its own brand enough that once that technology is established, whether it's an optical zoom or an audio feature or an AR feature, they can follow afterwards, and their brand will actually like galvanize it in society and make it a real thing. That's not the case when it comes to paradigm shifts. This is not a technological hardware firmware shift. This is a paradigm shift where we are going from the information age of the mid-90s to the application age of the late 2000s, when apps became a thing, to the intelligence age. We have now entered an intelligence race. And the fear for somebody like a Google, when it comes to Bing, is that the head start that ChatGPT could get, especially when accelerated and lubricated by the kind of capital and market reach that Microsoft has, could give them such a head start that they could actually end up becoming the dominant player over a 10 to 20 year window, which is exactly what we saw with Google. Google owned search so well, even though they were certainly not the first player in search, but the way that they were able to put out their indexing technology, it put them so far ahead that effectively once Google took the #1 spot, it was impossible for somebody else to knock them off it. And I think that's the reason why we saw these semi-developed products come out a lot quicker. This is a thing that's happening in technology, period, at the moment. Like, if you look at rapid release as a paradigm in society, especially when it comes to technology, we're seeing it in web, we're seeing it in AI, we're seeing it in AR and VR, and we're seeing it in biotech. So just taking example, what happened in 2020, how quickly did they get the injections out? Pretty quick, right? Because there's no time to delay. There's already a lot of talk in the market about the fact that Apple is about to release its AR VR headset, which was scheduled to come out in January, and that for the first time ever, Apple's going to put out an iterative product. They're not going to put out a product that the market is quote unquote ready for. They're just going to put it out there and develop it over time. And one of the biggest signatures of that is the fact that they're saying that Apple might have an external battery pack for its glasses. Like, it literally might have something that you clip to your belt or that you wrap around your waist, and that will power these AR glasses, these augmented reality glasses that where you can see through them and you can see the real world, but it overlays data. You know, like you met this person once here before, or you're near your favorite coffee shop, you know, they've got a deal on, or whatever the case may be. So we are now going to see innovation cycles tighten. And it's interesting that if you then overlayer the tightening of innovation cycles into the economic cycle that we're in, which is that the UK is dealing with Brexit. You've got cost of living crisis. You've got interest rates going up and down. It's very, very crazy to see the tightening of the innovation loop with all of the undercurrent damage that we have in the economy at the moment. It's not as if we're in a growth economy. Do you know what I mean? And I wonder if you look at the last 5 years worth of data, and then the 5 years prior, and then the 5 years prior, and the 5 years prior, was there a kind of innovation luxury timeline where people could release stuff slowly? Like Apple could enter markets really, really slowly because in general, the market was going up and their core products like iPhone and AirPods would continue just to spit out cash. And now we already know that AR, I've known about AR coming out this year since 2019 through my relationships with that industry. Mm-hmm. But we've just seen Apple go into banking, consumer banking, retail banking, and they're offering, was it 4.5 point something percent, 4 point something percent as a retail bank. Apple now needs to make these big headways for them to continue to hit their quarterly growth targets. They can't do it by quote unquote selling more iPhones or selling more Apple Watches. They've got to go into whole other industries to give them that kind of growth. So that's the reason why you're seeing everybody play the catch-up game really, really quickly. And what's really interesting is right now, especially in the last week, we've now seen what I always call the Coke Pepsi scenario, which is like who is the A and B player. We've now seen that kind of come to a head with what some people are calling colloquially Bing, which is Bing Chat, and your traditional Google Bard. You've now got these two players that are just going to thug it out like over a long period of time. And we've seen that at various points in other industries. We've seen like Adidas versus Nike or Mercedes versus BMW. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The reason why it's happening faster, to answer your question, because I understand it's a long answer for a short question, is because it's a paradigm shift and not a technology shift. The first mover advantage could be really, really damaging for the second mover in this scenario. So we covered a lot there. And then also like, look at the variants. Have you seen, what's the autofill thing called? That Firefly have just released. Have you seen Adobe Firefly?
I haven't looked into it a lot, but I hear something you're very interested in.
Generative fill. So generative fill is really interesting. Worth Googling. You should absolutely go check it out. But generative fill effectively is where you can prompt Photoshop to do something for you based on the way you would write something into ChatGPT. Now, this is genius because in my creative career, I've mastered a lot of different parts of digital media. But my one blind spot, and it's the case for many creatives, is Photoshop. I've always sucked at Photoshop. The fact that we were even able to put any Photoshop content out when Vic and I were doing Love Soul was because Vic knew Photoshop to a decent level. And I would literally sit next to him and say, add this here, cut this out. What we were doing in 2006, 2007 is that Vic was Adobe Firefly. And he was taking my prompts and doing them. Now, instead of me pointing my finger at a part of an image and showing a circle and saying, make this more blue, you literally use your mouse to circle an area and say, put a leopard here, and it will do it. So this is genius. And this is one of the best things about AI at the moment is it is AI reflecting life. Like Firefly for Adobe is literally doing Vic's job and still allowing me to not be without that knowledge gap. Do you know what I mean? Before I would need somebody who had the skill to collaborate with. Now AI is like, yeah, I can do it for you. So it's going to be really, really massive. And that's one advantage that AI has had over like the last 2 years of the Web3 phenomenon is if you want to onboard with Web3, it's really unfamiliar. Like get a wallet, remember these 12, 16 words, do this, do that. You need a hardware wallet. You need to use Coinbase. You can do swap websites. You can have a wallet on your browser called Fire. What was it called? Fire. What was the wallet called?
Firefly? No.
I've got it on here. Yeah. It's called. I'm actually looking at it. MetaMask.
Oh, MetaMask.
Right. Yeah. So you've got all these things. The onboarding was really crazy. Whereas ChatGPT isn't different to using Google. It's type in what you want and it'll present the information to you. But instead of giving you 10 links, it'll just give you an answer, which is an amalgamation of those 10 links. So when you look at Firefly, it's doing the exact thing that Vic and I would do, which is we say, please give me this arrow here in this part of the image. AI is going to now really make shit really, really interesting.
Yeah. What's also interested me, and I think you maybe talked about this a little bit on prior podcasts, is, okay, the first concern, as you mentioned, Firefly, is what happens to the Vics or the people like Vic that have this as their full-time job? Are they completely getting removed from the equation? Well, then the next question becomes, there's actually going to be an entire new class of skills that are created in this world of GPTs and version of GPTs, which are prompt generators or prompt experts. And I don't know if the world necessarily understands the dynamics of what is just a prompt to a given application versus what's actually an effective, detailed, and specific prompt, be it to a GPT, be it to a Firefly. Do you want to talk a little bit about what?
No, they don't, but that's good. That's a good thing. As long as I've been in the industry, I've seen whole industries come up and whole industries die in front of my eyes. I've participated in it. Perfect example would be ringtones. Ringtones was a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I was active in that industry for a good number of years. And then it went. Now, if you said to me, all of the people that I knew when I was in the ringtones industry, where are they now? What are they doing? I'm like, I've got no idea. I hope they're doing fine. But if they're not, it's their fault. So if somebody does Photoshop full time and doesn't pivot and adapt, then that means that they are not in the market contributing to the market as a creative. They're in the market contributing as somebody who knows how to use Photoshop. Does that make sense? A creative person can apply creativity to anything. Somebody who knows how to use Photoshop can only apply Photoshop. That's the reason why when piracy came after the music industry, the pirates and the streamers that eventually became the legal pirates said that the reason why we're completely happy with millions of people losing their jobs in the music industry is because they don't know how to sell music. They know how to sell CDs. So as long as there's a CD involved, the music industry can sell it through retail and other means like that. But they can't sell music. The people that sell music are Spotify, Live Nation, the concert promoter, and all of the people that do all the merchandising. They're the people that sell music as a paradigm. The other people just sell CDs. So if you're offering like creative services that are fixed to narrow softwares, and now those softwares have become more efficient, yeah, people are going to lose their jobs. And some of them will go and some of them will retire because they're late in life. Other ones will go work in petrol stations. Other ones will become good at prompting. Like, honest question, have you sat in front of Google or any of the AI services and asked it, what do I need to know about prompting?
Not specifically in that way, no.
Vic? Vic's voice is gone. I'm going to voice what Vic says.
ChatGPT, how should I prompt you to do something?
Perfect.
Yeah.
So and unfortunately the world's not like that. So Vic said, I asked ChatGPT, how should I prompt you to do something? So the world's going to be this way. There are going to be people that I'm not criticizing you, by the way.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy. And eventually at some point, whether you've got a free day or you're on the toilet or you see a YouTube video that inspires you, at some point you're going to be like, bing, in my head, I should probably learn how to prompt, because lots of people are saying, even you just now said in the podcast, that there'll be a whole other industry of people that just do prompting.
Yeah.
So at some point you might say to yourself, I'm going to teach myself this weekend how to prompt, but other people won't. So if you're not born with the gift of curiosity, or you're not that kind of opportunist or capitalist where you're trying to figure it out, then you lose. And unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. Like, it's terrible. And I hate to see people lose their jobs. And for some people, that means not making rent, losing your property, divorcing your partner, not being able to make up mortgage payments, becoming a heroin addict. You know, it can go really bad for some people, but that's just unfortunate. I'm not 6'8" and I don't have an NBA, contract to play basketball. I just play to my strengths. But if you're not curious enough to literally be like, there's 300,000 videos on YouTube right now about learning how to prompt. Let me go watch 4 of them just in case that gives me an extra 5 years on my career. Then you lose. Sounds cold, but I've effectively just got no, what do you say? Like no, I don't care about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those people, you got to get on it.
I mean, it's not even about you. It's just the way the world moves and the speed that it's consistently moving at
Yeah.
has no room for people that are not willing to be curious to see where the world's going in the next month, year, 2
Yeah.
years, right?
Yeah. And I get it if you're my dad. If you're 69 and retired and you're not looking at starting a new career, then you don't need to necessarily learn about AI. You just need to wait for Amazon to put it in a box. You put that box on your coffee table, and whatever that box is meant to do for you using AI, it will do. He's the end consumer. He's the end user. But somebody was speaking to me the other day, and I made a post about this, about freelancing on my Instagram. And they were like, I want to freelance. Like, where do you think the market is? And I was like, if you right now spend one day a week for the next 4 weeks immersed in what AI can do, so starting off with a guide to AI, then looking at videos on YouTube about how will AI affect banking, how will it affect retail, how will it affect aerospace, you will be able to hold a conversation with somebody who will think that you're intelligent enough to give you a freelancing contract. Not about AI. They might make you an office manager. But the fact that you can speak to that is crazy. And what makes AI really unique and means that people have no excuse for not learning about it is that for the first time ever, AI will teach you about AI. Like to Vic's example, you can go to ChatGPT and say, teach me about ChatGPT.
So,
and all you need to do to log
create
in
a separate like chat that's, let's say for what I've done, you asked me that earlier question. While I've not asked ChatGPT, how should I prompt you? I've created a separate chat which is just called Prompt GPT, and I use it to generate effective prompts for all of my other chats.
Yeah.
So I'll say, hey, I want to learn more about, let's say, food delivery.
Yeah.
Give me the right prompting questions to ask in another specific chat. And then if I've not given it enough information for the prompt, it can ask questions back to me. So now you're actually having a conversation with a specific, version of the AI to get you to the effectively comprehensive prompt that gets you to the answer you want.
Yeah. And if you're a business operator, like if you run a business like I do, you can't be expected to know everything. My TikTok is a shambles. Considering I'm in content, my personal TikTok is basically zero. I have used Discord. I don't enjoy it. And I've got like money wrapped up in it. I do not use Mastodon. I'm very light on LinkedIn. So you can't be master of everything. Do you know what I mean? Even some of the biggest content creators I know in the world have a head of YouTube, a head of Snapchat under their personal brand. They have a head of a platform that runs that platform for them. So I'm not judging people that can't be on top of everything. That's a very rare breed of person that understands everything. But I also feel like if you've not figured out AI, or if you're not on top of what's going on, whatever the fuck happens to you, you must notice it, right? You're an in-shape guy. If someone keeps coming to you and saying, oh, you're giving me this advice, you give me this advice, but I smashed through like a Five Guys burger yesterday, and then after that I hit a pickle burger, and I did this and I did that. You're like, well, I'm telling you where the game is. I'm telling you where the market's going. If you don't act on it and you're a fuckwit and you end up with no job, what do you want me to do? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
AI is a very, very special technology, and I never felt this way about Web3. But at the same time, and Vic will tell you this, like I did take the weekends out to study it, write down pages and pages of note watching YouTube channels, Google and Wikipedia all these words, and then go back and watch the same YouTube videos again. Because if that shit becomes the reason why we make our next X amount of dollars, I don't want that opportunity to pass me by. It's a real rant actually, because I've not been able to like declutter a lot of my thoughts on AI this way. But it's really, really important that like people pay attention to it, because it's coming for everybody. I'll give you a real example, and this is an exceptional one. One of my good friends and agents messaged me last week and said, there's a corporate gig, can you do it? And I was like, yeah, no worries. And it was my exact demographic: Europeans over 40 years old, primarily wanted 80s and 90s pop music. But in the briefing they said, oh, but they do want some modern pop as well. And I was like, oh man. And I did a gig recently that didn't go like exactly the way I wanted it. And I was like, damn, I'm really falling behind on new music, because if you want to be a modern DJ today, when Vic and I were at the peak of our DJing, there'd be 3 to 10 records a week that would come out, 1 hour of downloading a week, and you could be the hottest DJ of the day. You know what I mean? You could have every latest T-Pain, T.I., Keisha Cole record, whoever the big people were in our genre at that time. Now you're getting that many records coming out every afternoon. So it's a lot to stay on top of. So I was like, how do I solve this? Well, I was like, well, who do I know? I do know that Kendrick Lamar, The Weeknd, Drake, Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, The Weeknd, what's my man's name? Justin Bieber, Dua Lipa. I know that these are big artists. So I literally typed into Bard, Google Bard. I was like, based on the following artists, you know, et cetera, Dua Lipa, Bruno Mars. I wrote all their names down. Based on these guys as a kind of like benchmark, please give me the name of 50 other songs of artists like these that had popular records in the UK, Germany, and US charts at the same time as these artists were putting out hit records. And it spat out 50 records back to me. Now I can take that list, copy it, give it to an assistant and say, log into my Tidal, the streaming service, make me a playlist by dragging them over that includes all of these songs. And if you see any instrumentals or non-explicit versions, you know, versions without the swear words, throw them in as well. Then when I open my Serato, which is my DJing software, that playlist is already in the cloud in my Serato. The songs are ready. So that's applying AI to like the real world. And I'm not even in music. Like it's not even a fraction of a single % of where we make our money today. But I was still able to apply that to it. Yeah. Not everyone's going to do that. That's actually a pretty, you know, I've got the time to think about that kind of shit. But ultimately, if you don't do it, what can you do? Like what goes in somebody else's mouth doesn't go in your stomach. You hope that everybody will do well. You hope that everybody will apply shit the way that you apply it. But if they don't, the fuck are you going to do? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's one simple thing that I think a lot of people don't fully digest is that, so you talked about, you know, watching YouTube videos and how it's so easy to learn about AI through the resources that are there online.
Yeah.
But you brought up something where you had a problem to solve.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell people when they want to learn about, let's say even at a simple level, what is ChatGPT? How do I use it? Find a problem in your life that you're struggling to solve right now. Maybe you have a business and you're trying to figure out what the job responsibilities should be for an administrative assistant that you want to hire in the next month. Ask ChatGPT. You're trying to, let's say you're trying to lose weight or gain muscle for a wedding in 6 months. Put that as the goal into ChatGPT and ask it to optimize a workout plan for you for the next 6 months for that. So now you're mentally invested into the problem, and therefore you're mentally invested into learning and taking out time to watch YouTube videos, look at resources online to get you towards a solution. You're not going to learn about these resources if you just throw arbitrary prompts into it, because it's not going to get fully internalized in your brain.
It's about adding ChatGPT into your portfolio of options. So I think it's worth taking multiple data sources, right? And that's what's interesting about the 40 odd years that I've been around, is that the data sources have increased. So when we were young, it was the library. You'd go to the library to get an answer to a question. If you had some money, you might have those things. What are they called? What were those Britannia things called, Vic? Those almanacs, encyclopedias. If your parents had money, you might be lucky every couple of years. You might have an encyclopedia set inside your house. An encyclopedia was the original ChatGPT because it had a cutoff point, right? So if you had the 1989 encyclopedia, that encyclopedia doesn't claim to know anything post 1989. The same way that ChatGPT says, I cannot give you data post 2021. And when the encyclopedia got connected to the internet and gave you real-time information, i.e. somebody died an hour ago and it's updated online, that encyclopedia became Wikipedia. Make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, now what you should be doing is, I'm going to research a health website. I'm going to look at my favorite creators on YouTube. I'm going to call the PT up that I know down the street and add ChatGPT in there. So if you really want to know how ChatGPT works, it's interrogate all of the data sources you normally would have, plus ChatGPT. And if you really want to understand the value that ChatGPT offers versus your PT friend or versus your favorite YouTuber, you need all three of the data sets to be like, well, next time I know, I'll just go to YouTube for this answer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start to understand the types of answers that OpenAI gives you, or any AI gives you, any large language model, then sometimes you might say to yourself, I don't need to go to YouTube for this. I'll give you another example this week. I had a tax query. Normally, I would go to my tax advisor in the UK. But I was like, let me just ask Bard. And Bard told me an answer that I remembered my tax advisor giving me last year. So if I'd rang him, I'd have been like, hey, dude, I need an answer to this question. And he'd be like, yeah, this is the answer. By the way, we spoke about this last year. And I tend to forget stuff. And I'd be like, yeah, we did speak about it, didn't we? Thanks so much. Bye. But I've just called him. My tax advisor doesn't charge me by the phone call or by the hour, but some do. Now I've got Bard. I was able to just type it in, and it literally verbatim told me the same thing that my tax advisor told me. And that's interesting as well, because how is ChatGPT and large language models are going to thrive in regulated markets? Why? Because there's only one answer. Does that make sense? If you've got something which is regulated by a federation, like in the UK, my brain's not working fully today, but in the UK, we've got the what's the financial authority for FSA? We've got the Financial Services Authority, right? If you go to the website, or you go to a registered accountant, or you go to watch a talk at a conference, or you watch a YouTube video, the answer will be the same.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, for example, how much tax would I pay if I earn over a certain amount? It would say you would pay this much tax because you'd pay this much in this bracket, this much in this bracket, this much in this bracket.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is regulated by law. Well, then why do you need a human being? You just go to ChatGPT, right? And now it becomes more interesting is that imagine if a regulated AI language model sits on top of your accounting software, like we use in our business, Zero. Zero manages all of our accounts and all of our revenues, cash flows, P&L, tax exposure. Imagine if now this LLM is sitting on top of your personal data. So you've got a large language model with an algorithm, which is OpenAI, and a closed language model, which is your personal business data, and it's giving you custom advice off that. This is a hybrid language model where you are actually getting the parameters of LLMs over a specific data set of a narrow LM. This is the shit that I'm excited about, because that makes my life much easier. I text both of my accountants in each country on average once every 6 weeks. So I won't, like, you know, whatever their name is, I'll be like, hey, dude, I just got an email from this government body that I'm dealing with. They told me I've got to do this. How do I do it? Help me. And I know that when they come up with their annual fees for me, they factor in how much I need them.
Yeah.
It's going to be very, 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 very disruptive, bro. Like, it's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, that last point you made about having a large language model over a closed language model or a smaller data set is very, very fascinating for me.
Yeah.
Because when you have an LLM that scours the internet, it gives you a lot of really useful and well-sifted information. But then what if you apply it to a specific set of data that you've gathered just about, let's say, the business bay market and consumer patterns here, and you have a very narrow set of information, but it goes very, very deep. So now what does the language model do, right? It could almost replace what would be potentially a business analyst at a specific firm to help you identify opportunities for which customer you should target over the next year, potentially what options you have for products to target a set of 4 or 5 buildings for, developmental properties.
Yeah, everything that becomes public knowledge now that can be interrogated by an AI model will 100% allow you to come up with those questions. Somebody said at the very, very beginning, I'm talking about weeks 1 to 5 of ChatGPT 3.5, someone said, I'm launching this product and I want to launch it in India. Can you tell me who my typical Indian customer would be demographically? And it came back with, it'll be a woman in her 40s with 2 kids that lives in this area in Mumbai with this kind of affordability. She doesn't work. She lives off this. It was crazy. And that was just based on like historic data. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy. It's a madness. So I think that's one area where people need to like super pay attention. And I want to use these platforms as well now. Like Vic and I were discussing for ALGO is like to specifically spit more stuff about content strategy, because we do go all over the place. But the reality is, I think where we're going into our business like a little bit more narrow. We're going to now talk more about like content and content strategy because it makes a lot more sense. And AI is the biggest thing to happen to content since the mobile phone. Like, when you look at this mobile phone, everything you need to make content is here. You can write blogs, you can take pictures, you can now make pictures with AI, you can make video, you can collect audio and make a podcast. So this is the firmware layer, like the hardened firmware layer. And then AI is going to be like this. It's like the intelligent software layer. Do you know what I mean? That will come in and do everything else for you. So it's going to be a really, really interesting time. Any pieces of content that you've seen this week that caught your attention? What was any YouTube videos, any posts, any Instagram memes, anything that made you go, wow? I'll start if you want.
I think there's actually this week, or at least the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's still within the AI space, but I am fascinated by the AI videos that people are generating. You know, the ones where, let's say, I think there was one example, if it was Bill Gates walking up to a DJ set at a club somewhere, and every frame is a slightly different photo where each person in the crowd turns into a different person. Bill Gates' face turns into a different version of him at a different time, a point in time or daylight. And then throughout the video, it suddenly switches over to Elon Musk's face and then goes over to Jeff Bezos' face. And that's fascinating to me because that style of video is just not something you can create in any sort of reasonable time frame with a human. So I'm just fascinated by where the world could go when you have AI applied to video production.
To your point, what I picked up on there is that is there a fascination or like a fandom or an obsession with specifically those characters in business? It's interesting that you mentioned them. I often find now that like there's almost like a godlike adoration, specifically of Elon, Bill, Jeff Bezos, increasingly like now, like, you know, Sam Altman and a few other guys, people like that. But even Chamath is another good example. But like, is there, for your age at 28 years old, who are these characters? Where do they sit on the chessboard of business? Because we had Alex on here for the longest time, right? He's 18, 19. He was really kind of like cutting edge consumer content creator priorities. But like, for you, who would it be? And sorry, why?
No, I hear you. I'm trying to make sure the answer is like effectively stating at least roughly my position.
Yeah.
I think for me, Chamath and Elon definitely are high up on that list.
Why?
They speak truths oftentimes that are potentially unconventional or not necessarily held as axiomatic by the masses, right?
Yeah.
I think, and this may be a little controversial, I don't know, but like, for example, Chamath talked about, he had a comment that he said, nobody cares about the Uyghurs.
Yeah.
And that was a big moment that actually got him a lot of flack.
Yeah, the Uyghurs are below my line.
Exactly.
Was his line, yeah.
And what he's saying is actually true, that I think
For him.
For him,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That we all have a set of priorities. And just like you said earlier, you can't be having your hands or have knowledge or expertise in everything. In the same way, you can't really care about everything in your life because you're just going to get overwhelmed. We have a set of priorities. There's things that go above that line. There's things that fall below that line. And we can pretend that we're into certain things, but now that maybe the Uyghur Muslims are on top of the line or below the line, right? That's just one example ultimately. But I wouldn't actually say that Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates fall high on my priority list in terms of what you mentioned was godlike or highly valued celebrity CEOs. I think
we have it in hip hop, right?
Sorry?
Like we have it in hip hop as well.
Yeah.
Like if you tend to ask people like who are the greatest, you know, depending on your generation, the answers can vary. But typically the median answer tends to be Biggie, Jay-Z, Nas, Wu-Tang Clan, you know, like that kind of like not the 80s and not the post 2000s, but really that kind of like hot era in the middle. And I feel like that's what's happening now, is that you're getting these names tend to be these stereotypical names that you hear when you're discussing like big business or the most powerful, influential people in technology and the world.
So to you, those specific hip hop artists, do they share a similar characteristic to you personally that make them part of the greats?
Yeah, they had enough of a layup to have a standard created before them, and they created enough of a difference between the standard that they came from and the standard that they created. And what's made it more interesting is that the people that have followed them haven't been able to raise the standard to the same level. So, with the exception of people like KRS-One and Big Daddy Kane in the 80s, the difference between another 80s artist, let's say a Special Ed or someone like that, and a Jay-Z is a it almost feels like a multi-generational difference. What Jay-Z did musically versus what like a Special Ed did. But if you look at a Lil Baby, who I love, what he's done, the distance between what he's done and what Jay-Z's done is not as big of a distance. The only person that's in the conversation today is Drake. Because Drake may be able to say, I've had the longest career with the most amount of record sales. But even then, I think Jay-Z closed the door behind him, locked it, and then threw grenades in every window and blew the house up behind him. Because with Jay-Z, he can attribute a lot of his album sales to somebody physically putting on some jeans, putting on a t-shirt, putting on a hoodie, putting on a jacket, putting on a beanie hat, putting on some gloves, charging up their travel card, traveling to a store, getting the CD on a certain day, coming home, putting it in their CD player and listening to it, versus just opening their phone and being like, I just saw a tweet or an Instagram post saying that he's just released this album, and then let's go to it. In our day, there was no surprise drops. People had to be told weeks and months in advance this record's coming out. So the privilege of instant access and instant gratification has allowed people to think that a Drake is as big as a Jay-Z, or a Kendrick is as big as a Tupac. Kendrick is incredible, and for me, he's as impactful as Tupac. But people were able to access his music through their phone, through the click of a button. The price they paid, both monetarily and the calories they had to burn to get the music, is a fraction of the calories you'd have to burn to go and get Me Against the World by Tupac.
So I'm almost comparing it to how you take a certain dollar value in 1970s and you adjust it for inflation. So you're almost like de-adjusting a person going and listening to a Drake, to account for the fact that a certain percentage of the people that listen to a Drake song today may have not had the same level of draw to Drake had it happened in the 1980s.
Yeah.
Read something in the newspaper, go out there, buy the CD, bring it back, put it in the CD player.
Yeah, so you're adjusting for inflated access. There's been an inflation in access, which means that you're adjusting for distribution. The distribution that these artists have access to is way higher than the distribution that a Jay-Z had access to, even in his peak, because his peak would have been 99 to 2012, 13, around the time that New York record came out, and the beginning of it would have been when the Annie record came out. Like, that was his hot zone of maybe 10 to 15 years. And he would have had more distribution challenges than a new artist would do today. Because there are artists today that their songs are going viral on TikTok. Within 24 hours, the streams are starting to go through the roof on Spotify. And now they're like generating money. So how do we end up on this point? I forgot. Content recommendations.
Yeah, and then we talked about godlike celebrities.
Yeah. So you mentioned those people.
Yeah. I mean, in some similar way, in the business world, these people like Elon, to a certain extent, that's the thing, is now using your framework of what constitutes a godlike figure in your world, I think that Elon would fit that, but Chamath probably wouldn't. Because I think that, especially with the way that he thinks about the purpose of engaging in a specific craft in his life, is a standard that he has set for the world to emulate that I don't think many have done before him. He thinks in decades and potentially even centuries, in a world where most CEOs and founders are thinking in quarterly or more yearly scenarios.
It's a good point, actually. Yeah, it's a good point. Especially when you look at like the amount of volatility that you've had in the last 5 years of Tesla stock.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, he doesn't pay much attention to it. Although he does just do some trickery, like buying Bitcoin and then buying it low and selling it high and all that kind of stuff. But Yeah, that's a good point. Do you think some of it comes down to the fact that when these people hit this level of financial freedom, that they're able to kind of liberate themselves from what the rest of society has to say to be safe? Like, you know, there are certain restrictions that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even mention the names of certain people on this podcast because I'm still building a 10, 15, 20, you know, and hopefully in the future 30, 40-year relationship with these people. So I don't reveal who they are or specifically what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're like a Chamath or an Elon, you can say whatever you want, because when you're sat on billions and billions of dollars, it's like, what's your downside? Your downside is you lose all your businesses, you lose all your reputation, but you're still sat on billions of dollars. Like, you'll always be adored because you've got that level of money, and the fact that you actually were able to get it is the thing that society will always love you for. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's like a backstop as to what your worst case scenario could be.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the element of financial security helps you to speak your mind, even if it's unconventional or not liked by the masses. But I think even more so than that, there's often one piece of evidence that some of these people lean on to help them have that confidence that I can say something unconventional, and this is my worst downside.
Yeah.
You know, with Chamath, yes, it was partly that Uyghur Muslim kind of comment. Sorry, just the Uyghur people comment. With Elon, it was his tweet about taking Tesla public at 420, right?
Yeah.
And the whole SEC
Wait.
went on his, what was it, private or public? He mentioned that he was either
it Tesla?
Uh,
And I remember the 420
yeah,
number.
yeah. So he was either taking one of his companies private or public, and and you know, it had a material effect on the stockholders, and the SEC said this is within, you know, outside of our rules and regulations around how you can actually move the market.
Yeah.
And while he's still working through that battle with the SEC, it has really not impacted at a significant scale the success of his business. And whether he may actively recognize it or not, it gives you that confidence to say, well, I have unconventional views, or I even have unfiltered views on the world. What's the worst that could happen?
Chamath said it amazingly. He was like, I was literally a refugee from Sri Lanka. I moved to Canada, educated myself, joined Facebook, did the following things. And he said, you will respect me the same way that you respect Warren Buffett. Like, he literally said it. I mean, I paraphrase, but he was like, this is the kind of growth that I've had, so I should be able to say whatever I want, and you better treat me the same way you treat these other people, because I've also done it. Yeah. So yeah, it was pretty dope. So that was your content thing for the week.
Yeah. What about you?
Which was, remind me again?
That was AI generated videos.
And where can people see that?
Instagram. Yeah, Instagram is where I see all my stuff. I
okay.
Predominantly spend the time there.
Yeah, for me it was I was able to vicariously watch through Instagram as well all of the stuff that the team at VaynerMedia and Gary Vee did with VCon. I thought that was pretty cool. So shout out to Tyler and Andy and Maha and Gary and D-Rock and all the gang over there that pulled that off. The staging was insane. The lineup was insane. Busta Rhymes came to perform on his birthday. Andrew Schultz came to perform. And then there was like a forever list, you know, of other people that were there. The merch looked insane. Everything looked cool. The video content starting to come out now. Stage content, that looks incredible. So yeah, I would say that would be my recommendation. I'm looking forward to like long form pieces of content coming out from that. Okay. And also like the content we created this week. So we were in the studio yesterday. We managed to put together somewhere between 10 and 12 videos. So we're putting out a lot of free content over the summer, which hopefully will be quite helpful to people. And it will help us figure out what we're doing with our next kind of set of brands. Yeah. So that was my stuff for the week. So that's what's been going on this week. Anything else we need to discuss?
No, I think that's good. We've covered a lot of topics here.
Yeah. Well, welcome on board. We're looking forward to like getting my friends, your friends pro off the ground, whatever that looks like. There's obviously going to be way more people plugged in and way more cool niche events that are going to spin off the back of it. So if anybody's like a hyper fan and is one of the 100 people that listens to this podcast every week, then you've now got a little heads up on what we're about to do. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, we're going to try and keep it consistent. We're now using Riverside, thanks to Adnan. So we'll be putting out more of this content even when I start traveling in 2 weeks. And Vic will hopefully be healthy and on the pod too. Oh, and a big welcome to you, Adnan, and to Thad, who just joined the ALGO group. We'll be adding some more people to the ALGO group in the coming weeks that I know that listen to the show. All right, wicked. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe. What means more than anything is sharing. So please do if you know anybody who enjoys these kind of conversations. And a belated birthday shout out to Flo. Going out for dinner with him later on tonight for a birthday dinner. And enjoy, and we'll speak to you next week. Peace.